Welcome to Sunday School. Nice picture here on our bulletin. Last week, looking out the front door there, it was beautiful, beautiful temperature, and now we're seeing the trees starting to bud and the birds starting to sing. As we see the cycle of life, and it's talking that in the Song of Solomon. As you see, he goes over that again and again about the cycle of life, and there's nothing new under the sun, yet God's mercies are new every day. Every day. Take your bulletin here. We'll go over some of the announcements. Anyone visiting for the first time? Okay. Anyone need a bulletin? Just raise your hand. We're having this Great Commission revival, which is amount to visitation to absentees and to prospects on April the 12th, 13th, and 14th. Several bereavement announcements. Betty Burkhart and the homecoming of her husband, Tom, last Tuesday night. Funeral will be held on Tuesday, April the 13th at 1 o'clock, and he will be buried at Blanchester, Ohio. A special choir presentation coming up the day he wore my crown, April 16th at 7 o'clock here at the church. Prayer breakfast, Saturday, April the 17th. A men's prayer breakfast. A missions, the school, mission fair, and senior spaghetti dinner on Thursday, April the 22nd at Ruby Hall. Of course, Mother's Day is coming up, and we'll be having special services and a Mother's Day luncheon. We have a special announcement here about the Bradys, about Jim and Judy Brady and their family and the tragic accident of their son, Aaron. Anybody have any up-to-date? Jim, is that, I see you there. How's your son doing? What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. You know, I talked to you last Sunday, but I didn't know that. I'm sorry. So let's certainly be in prayer for Jim and Judy and their family. The Sensible family and the loss of Donna's dad. So as we start this spring season, there's always good things to mention and always things as life, that cycle of life that we mentioned, that the good and the difficult. But we're glad to have Emma back today, so she's going to come and give us something a little different, I think.
I wanted to read to you an obituary, and this is an obituary of Mr. Common Sense. Today we mourn the passing of a beloved old friend, Mr. Common Sense, who's been with us for many years, and you all know him, or knew him. No one knows for sure how old he was, since his birth records were long ago lost in bureaucratic red tape. He'll be remembered as having cultivated such valuable lessons, such as knowing when to come in out of the rain, or why the early bird gets the worm. And he also knew that life wasn't always fair, and that maybe it was my fault. Well, Mr. Common Sense lived by simple, sound financial policies. Don't spend more than you can earn. And reliable strategies such as adults and not children are in charge. His health began to deteriorate rapidly when well-intentional but overbearing regulations were set in place. There was reports of a 6-year-old boy charged with sexual harassment for kissing a little classmate. Teens suspended from school for using mouthwash after lunch. And a teacher was fired for reprimanding an unruly student, only worsened Mr. Common Sense's condition. Common sense lost ground when parents attacked teachers for doing the job that they themselves should have been doing all the time. It declined even further when schools were required to get parental consent to administer suntan lotion or to give a child an aspirin, but could inform parents when a student became pregnant and wanted to have an abortion. Common sense lost the will to live as the churches became businesses and criminals received better treatment than their victims. Common sense also took a beating when you couldn't defend yourself from a burglar in your own home, and the burglar could sue you for assault. Common sense finally gave up the will to live after a woman failed to realize that a steaming cup of coffee was actually hot. She spilled a little in her lap and was promptly awarded a huge settlement. Common sense was preceded in death by his parents' truth and trust, by his wife, discretion, by his daughter, responsibility, and by his son, reason. He is survived by his stepbrothers, I know my rights, I want it now, and someone else is to blame, and also a stepbrother, I'm a victim. Not many attended his funeral because so few realized he was gone. So if you still remember him, pass this information on, and if not, join the majority and do nothing. Thank you. Now we have birthdays for January, February, March, and April. So do we have anybody in that category? Okay, just keep your hands up and I'll come around.
I'll entertain you as Emma
Is there any in the
going to
back?
these people, but I don't dance. But anyway, responsibility. I think common sense went out the door with responsibility. You know, people don't want to be responsible, and that's why we have come to the point that we are today, that it's always somebody else's job.
Okay.
You know, if somebody else is being attacked on the street, well, you don't want to get involved. You know, this is how people are today, in the sense of not using common sense and not taking action, not being responsible. You know, God is looking on us all, and we are responsible. We're responsible for each other. We're responsible, first of all, to God. So, Emma, I know that you had some hands
Okay,
over here.
who
Keep your
else?
hand
Who
raised
else?
up. I know we have.
3 of you? Let's see. In what month? February, March. Well, I gave out marbles the last time and a block the time before that, and I'm giving out a rock this time. So I don't have any common sense.
Yeah.
So,
I sort of mentioned that as we was driving to church this morning. I said, you've given out all these jokester gifts, sort of. I said, and then you're going to talk about common sense? Yeah. She said, oh, yes. Got everybody? Don here. Okay, before the pastor comes, it seems like I've always heard a good teacher can make the complicated simple. Seemed like through my life I've went the other way and I've made the simple complicated. And so I don't know if that means I'm a bad teacher or what. People would answer, oh, why don't you make it more simple? I said, and then I would answer them, why don't you ask an easier question? And we find out, and as I've studied the Bible, especially on Bible questions, none of them are easy. And the fact that you're asking the question means that it's not easy. It means you've tried other places and you've tried maybe asking this question to other Christians and so forth, and find out that, everybody's got a different opinion and they're not sure. We're bringing a question up today that it sounds easy, but is it? And the question is this: what is the difference between soul and spirit? Oh, that sounds easy, doesn't it? It's not easy to a Jehovah's Witness who would tell you your soul dies with your body. Nobody's soul is saved. No soul goes on after death. The soul dies with the body. Wow, where'd they get that? And so how do we express the difference? The idea of soul and spirit and how they interact with each other. We know that we are created in the image of God, and God is a Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. And as I start thinking about this body, soul, and spirit, and I think about the Trinity of man. And in the Bible, it talks about the different natures of man, and it talks about man as has a natural body, a man is natural, which refers to the body. He is carnal, which refers to the soul. He is spiritual, which refers to the spirit. Of course, body conscience is world conscience. We think about our consciences that we have, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and touch. Our body relates to the world. Body, soul, and spirit. The body relates to the world. The soul. The soul is self-consciousness. It represents self-consciousness. It represents who we are. So if I asked you what would be an attribute of the soul, I would maybe ask you, what's the attribute of the mind? Or the mind, is it the mind represented by the soul or the spirit? Just for curiosity, how many would put the mind as we think and as we operate? Would you say that that is attributed to the soul or the spirit? How many believe the mind is attributed to the soul? How many believe that the mind is attributed to the spirit? I can see everybody's got this figured out. Soul and spirit. So when we start thinking about these things, as I've read many times about the soul and the soul is self-consciousness. It talks about memory and affection and imagination. The soul relates to the body. You say, I thought you said the body relates to the world. Well, yes, and the soul relates to the body. I first heard this from a Jehovah's Witness, and I questioned it, but I didn't know how to answer it. And their statement was this: we are a soul, and we have a spirit. And I thought, what's wrong with that? Sounds good to me. And from what I know and what I've studied, yes, we are a soul, but we have a spirit. When we start thinking about the differences of the soul and the spirit, I know sometimes they're used interchangeably. I mean, you can tell that in the context that they're used in. And you say, why do you say that? Because the soul normally relates to the body, but it talks about the soul after death. It talks about the soul living or existing after death. If you ever studied the book of Revelation, you know John looked into heaven and he saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus Christ. He saw souls. Yes, he saw souls. So, but normally when we think about the term soul, and it's used in the Bible, it relates to the person. It relates to life. It relates to self, the soul. But the soul, the sin of it shall die, and the soul can be saved. The soul can be saved, and it can be saved for eternity. So, in one extent, it relates to the body, but in another extent, it continues after life. And here's another interesting thing as you think about soul and spirit, in the aspect that the Bible talks about the spirit going back to the Lord. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it talks about man, that when he dies, that his spirit returns to the one that gave it. And it talks about in the Bible about the spirit of the unsaved man, the natural man, that it is dead in trespasses and sins. It even goes to the application like the unsaved man, that he doesn't have a spirit, or the spirit is dead and it cannot respond to God. Because as the soul relates to the body, the spirit relates to God. And an unsaved person, they are separated from God. Their spirit is dead to God. And this is why we need to be what? Born again. This is why we need to be saved. And so when we are saved, we are born again and we receive the Spirit of God. And then we're body, soul, and spirit. You say, you're making this complicated. Well, it is complicated. When you start thinking about the Trinity of man, it's like talking about the Trinity of God. But I just wanted to leave you with this thought here, that this is why we come to a point at one time when we realized we were lost. We were dead to God. We were separated from God. When we received Christ as our Savior, we received His Spirit, we were born again, and now we have the Spirit of God. Not only the soul that relates to the body, but now we have the Spirit of God and we've been born again. Body, soul, and spirit. So each one, they're distinguishable, but in the sense they're not used, they're used interchangeably many times. This is why it's confusing when people talk about, does the spirit come back or the soul come back? When Jesus comes back, He's going to bring the spirit and the soul with Him, and He is going to raise the dead, and the spirit and the soul is going to be reunited with the body. I see the pastor has come in, and I know he is ready to go. So, Pastor.
Right, Brother Mike, thank you so much. Thank you.
Stir our pure minds.
Okay, I'll try to. Yes, sir. All right. Well, I know you've already made some announcements. Won't we stand and just kind of greet one another for a second, okay? And would you already do that? Would you do that now? Come in. All right, we'll get back. Thank you for being here this morning. If we're going to start, the attendance keeping was started on May the 1st. So if you're absent before May 1st, I'll forget it. I won't even know you're absent. But if you're absent after that, I want to know every time you're absent. So I don't know if we have any forms. I think most of you have probably filled out a form. And I had Miss Amy go through our records, and she's found folks that normally would come or have been coming. And so we'll have a roll list. And so what I still need is a couple ladies that will take those attendance sheets and take care of them. Brenda's already said she would do it. And then when some of the ladies that have been doing that come back, if they're able to come back, when they come back, we'll yield that job back to them. Miss Thelma used to be was back there, and Connie Carlson and Barbara. So when they're able to come back, if they would, we'll gladly let them kind of take over, but we'll fill in for them. It's time we start doing that, working on building our class. At one time, and really we still are, as far as the adult Sunday school classes, we are still the largest adult Sunday school class. But we used to beat everybody by about 20 or 25. Now we beat everybody, some other classes. They come and rob out of here. That's okay. And by the way, if anybody ever feels like, hey, I would like to try another Sunday school class, you're welcome to do that. We're not captive. This is not a captive audience. We have several adult Sunday school classes, and you'd be welcome to try any of those. And same thing, those that are in other classes are able to move around as well if you like. But anyway, we have a lot of prospects in our class. Our class probably has the largest absentee list of folks that have not been able to return because of COVID. So we're hoping that will take a turn here for the better, and and so you can help us. If you know of folks that have been in our class, or I'm looking for at least 2 other ladies that will be willing to be at the back table. What you do, the role is you come at the back table. We'll have attendance sheets. People will come beginning May 1st. They'll just come. They'll sign their name according to the alphabet, and then those ladies that are looking after those books will simply take the book when everyone gets in, and they'll mark the book, and so we'll have a record, of who's here, and then we can better notify ourselves when someone is absent. And sometimes people are absent and they let us know about it. Sometimes people are absent and they think we know about it. They get sick and they think we know about it, when in reality we don't know about it. And so that'll help us to be able to look after people in a better way. So if there's a couple ladies that would like to help with that for a while, you let me know, and I'll be glad to get you involved in that. All right, we'd had some prayer requests already, Brother Mike. Okay, let's we have some fellows. We'll give out these outlines today, and we'll finish up. Here you go, Brother Mike. You can have a few of these down the front. I'll get these guys in the back here. I guess the reason I come in the morning, I can't hardly talk, because I've been up a long time, but I've been driving a bus the whole time, and so I haven't been talking to anybody. So that's good for the kids on the bus, because they must have been pretty well behaved if I didn't have to say anything. So get this frog out of my throat. All right, let's open our Bibles to the book of Micah. There's 7 chapters in the book of Micah. And we went through the first 3 the Sunday before Easter. Well, I had to check the calendar just to get in my mind that last Sunday was Easter. It seemed like it's been an eternity. Sometimes the weeks go by fast, and sometimes they just go long. This was a pretty long week this week. We have a lot of things that were going on, so please pray for the Breeding family. I know you guys have already had some prayer for that this morning. And also, I have a funeral here tomorrow evening here in the church for Don Seger. That's the father of Donna Sensenball. And also Betty Kreitzer Burkhart. Betty was married many, many years to Dave Kreitzer, and he passed away. And then I don't know how long, they went a year or so later, she met a man whose wife had passed away, and they were married for 3 years, and then he passed away this last week. So that funeral will be on Tuesday. So pray for Miss Betty, and pray for the Sensenballs, and also pray for Brother Jim and Judy and their family, and just some hard times. So anyway, that makes for a full week. Just a reminder, I know you got that announcement in the bulletin, that we were scheduled to start a revival today with Dr. Raymond Barber, and about 3 weeks ago, he called and said his wife she has a real bad back problem, and she was not able to travel, nor was she able to be alone. He had to be with her and take her to doctor appointments and this type of thing. So he had to cancel the meeting, and we'll have him at another time as soon as he's available. So we determined what to do, and so we decided we'll use this as an opportunity. We're calling it the Great Commission Revival, and we're going to finish up a task that we started about 3 months ago. We took every name that we had on our membership list, and from that names on the membership list, we broke them down and made three visits on a page, and we had about 130 or 40 pages, which is about over 400 families to visit. And so many of you have helped with that. And so what you do, you get a page that's got 3 names on it. They're in the same area code. Many of them are very close together. And so you and a partner, you and your mate, or you and a friend, it's a friendly visit. These are folks that are not strangers to our church. These are people that are familiar with our church. They're on our mailing list. Some of them are just maybe those that have been absent because of COVID. Some of them are just folks maybe for whatever reason have not been here. And some of them are regular attenders. Matter of fact, your name is on that list. And hopefully, you say, well, I don't want anybody coming to my house. Well, here's how you keep from doing that. You go find the paper that's got your name on it, and you take that paper, and then you visit 2 other people, and you'll be off the hook, okay? But believe me, a lot of people have done that already. A lot of people run back there and found the page with their name on it. And so the visits that I've been able to make off that list so far, over half those visits are people that are here every Sunday, but we're just trying to touch everyone. The visit could be as simple as knocking on the door and standing at the door and saying, hey, we're just here to let you know we're trying to visit all of our members and all of those that are connected with our church. God bless you. I don't think I've ever met you. My name is so-and-so, and you could introduce yourself. Or if you know them, you can just say a good howdy to them, and you can make a decision. They may invite you in. If they do, you can say, well, sometimes people invite you in when they don't want you in. You ever get that feeling? Sometimes people just want to be nice. So you have to judge about that. And you can say, oh, I don't really have time. We've got 3 visits we're going to make. We got to be back at the church at 8 o'clock. So we just wanted to come by and say, God bless you. And, and say, is there anything we can pray with you about? And let them give you a prayer request. And then if you feel comfortable praying with them, you pray with them. If not, you say, well, I'll take this prayer request back and give it to the preacher. That's kind of the visit you'll make. We need to finish that up. That's a program we started, and it's very important to us. Sometimes we spend a lot of time looking for the lost, and that's good. But we're not only to be fishers of men, we're to be keepers of the aquarium. We need to keep the sheep and watch after the sheep. And so it's very important. So you can come and help us. We'll meet here. Actually, on Monday, we'll meet over in the high school building because I have a funeral here at 7 o'clock. We'll meet at the church at 6:30, and then you'll go out and make your visit. And if you don't have a partner, we'll hook you up with someone. And then you come back at 8 o'clock. We'll have some refreshments. We'll give some testimonies, and we'll have prayer. You'll be on your way home by 8:15 or 8:30. And then we'll do that Monday, Tuesday, and also Wednesday night. So it's 3 nights. Please get involved. We also will have a group of going out door to door, passing out literature. You can knock on a door, or you can put gospel tracts behind the door. We'll be going on some bus routes and some other areas. Also, we're going to have some tables set up. We'll have tables set up in the back of the auditorium. On Monday night, they'll be over in the fireside room. The other nights, Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll have tables set up, and we'll have cards, and we'll have names, and you can send a card. You can write a card. Some of you do that already. You can come and do that as part of this revival. Send a card to shut-in, or send a card to someone in a nursing home. We have a large list of that, and so we'll make that card out. We'll have it addressed for you, and we'll even mail it for you. Or if you would like to contact a missionary, we will have some addresses. But if you have a phone and you would be willing to use your phone, and you could send an email. Most of our missionaries have emails, and you could send an email message to a missionary. And our goal is we would love to send a personal email or a personal note to every one of our missionaries. But so it's going to take a lot of folks. So anybody can do any of those things. You can either go out and visit someone that we know. You can go door to door with others that'll be on a bus. We'll put you on a bus. You'll go to an area, pass out tracts door to door, or you can come here and you can write notes. So if you don't want to do that, well, I'll tell you what, we'll have a place where you can go pray for those that are doing that. So everybody get involved. If we were having revival, I have confidence that we'd have a good turnout for the revival if we had a preacher up here preaching. But, sometimes we need preaching, but sometimes we just need to put in practice what we hear preached. Amen? So that's my commercial. That's enough of that. Okay? All right. Okay, the book of Micah. And we're going to try to finish this up and get on to Nahum next. Micah, remember, who is like Jehovah is what his name means. He was a country preacher. And he's prophesying concerning both the tribes of Judah, the 2 southern tribes, and also the tribes of Israel, the 10 northern tribes. And so let's look at, we went through the first 3 chapters. Now let's look at chapter number 4. Chapter number 4 says, in Micah 4, but in the last days it shall come to pass, and it always comes to pass, so here it is, that the mountains of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow into it. And many nations shall come and say, come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Well, to me, this is very obviously a chapter that's beginning to talk about the prophecy of the millennial reign. We know it sometimes, we call it the 1,000-year reign, and the 1,000-year kingdom that comes after the Great Tribulation period. And from these verses, first 5 verses there, the Lord's going to teach the law from Mount Zion or Jerusalem. And the Lord also, according to verse number 3, and he shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off. So not only will he teach his law, but he's going to be the judge. He will judge. and rebuke people and strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So that's the millennial reign. It doesn't mean there'll be complete peace, but it'll appear that there's peace, because all sorts of rebellion will be judged quickly, but there'll still be rebellion in the heart. You know, a lot of times rebellion can't be seen outwardly, but there is rebellion in the heart. We know that because at the end of the millennial reign, when the Antichrist, when the devil is loosed from his pit, and he gathers a great multitude of people to come against God and God's people at the end of the millennial reign. But it says in verse 4, look at it, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. So this just means every man's going to have his own place to live. There's not going to be a housing shortage. There's not going to be a shelter. They have to go to some shelter. Everybody says, every man shall sit under his vine, and under his fig tree, and none shall make him afraid. So there's going to be a time of peace. You don't have to worry about locking the doors. Can I tell you about me having to lock my doors this week? I was studying about 11:30, 11:15. I heard something outside. I thought out in my driveway where I keep my trash cans, and I thought, well, some animal must have bumped my trash can. And I just kept on studying. About 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. When your doorbell rings at, almost, quarter till midnight or so, it's a little bit, what I do now. So, well, I went to the door. What do you do when you ring the doorbell? So I went to the door, and I opened the door, and there stood a man with a gun. And I recognized the man. He was my neighbor. He'd just been in there moved in about 2 weeks ago. I didn't remember his name. I know his name now well. I know his name very well right now. So I opened the door, and I said, can I help you? And kind of gruffly, he's a young man. He's a big guy. He says, is there somebody in your backyard? I said, I hope not. I don't think so. He said, well, I just saw a man standing right out by your car in your driveway by your trash cans. And I asked him what he was doing. He said he was running from somebody that was trying to shoot him. It wasn't me. And he said, I went in my house to call the police. I came out, and he was standing in my backyard. And I went in my house to get a gun. I came out, and he's gone. He said, I called the police. The police came. There's 4 cruisers out here, and said, they were there a minute, and they said, we got to go. We got another call. So he was looking for this guy. So I said, well, so I unlocked my gate to my backyard. We walk in. I was pretty brave then because he had the gun. I was right behind him. I'm backing him up. I had his back, So we went in, went around back of my garage, inside my garage, around side of my house. So anyway. There's going to be a day when you better believe me, sometimes I don't lock my door till later. I've been locking my door 4 or 5 times every day to make sure it's locked. But the end of that story was the next day I did call the dispatch, found out there was a man, and they caught that man, and they arrested that man. So anyway, I felt a little better about it, but only Lord knows he probably got out on bail a few hours later. So I still got my guard up a little bit. But anyway, there's going to be a time when there's nothing like that. There's going to be peace. Look what it says. But they shall, verse 4, they shall set every man under his vine and under his fig, and none shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken it, for all people will walk every one in the name of his God. Now, that's a little bit strange saying right there, under the name of his God. It's got a little G there. So some indication that not every man is going to be, there'll be other gods that I don't understand all that, but everyone will walk in that. But if they walk, it's going to be a walk that that's not going to bring violence. And we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. In that day, verse 6 says, saith the Lord, will I assemble her that holdeth, and I will gather her that is driven out. Now this her, if you will, I'll just put a little note. in verse number 6, I believe her is speaking of Israel. In that day, saith the Lord, will I assemble Israel that holdeth, and I will gather Israel that is driven out, and Israel that I have afflicted. And I will make Israel that holdeth a remnant, and Israel that was cast far off a strong nation. So I believe that's Israel. So Lord, during that millennial reign, Israel and the Jewish people will be a strong people at that time. So that's what, let me just read you the little outline about that, a little summary of that. Verses 6 and 7, or after verse number 5, verse 6, in the millennium the Lord will reign over the Jewish people, and his reign will continue forever. And I'll give you a reference over to chapter 6 and verse number 7. Even though Judah must be taken captive to Babylon, they will finally be rescued by the Lord at his revelation. You find that at verses 8 and 9. The nations of the world will gather against Israel. Now, look at it in verse 11. I think that's what it is. Chapter 4, verse 11. Now, also many nations are gathered against thee that say, let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. So let her, Israel, be defiled. So when these nations gather at the end of the millennial reign, I believe they're gathering not only against God, but they're gathering against God's people. And of course, we know the Jewish people, they'll be gathered against them. But verse 12, I circled that in my Bible. It says, but they're going to gather together. They're going to have a great army coming against the Lord and his people. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel. For he shall gather them as the sheaves unto the floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thy hoofs brass. In other words, I'll make you strong. And thou shalt beat in pieces many people, and I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. So the Lord will look after his people. Chapter 5 is a familiar portion of Scripture. Look in verse number 2. It says, but thou, O Bethlehem Ephratah. So we know that prophecy. This prophecy is concerning not only the first coming, but it refers to the second coming. In verse 1 it says, now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel. So the judge of Israel is, I believe, a reference to the first coming of Christ. And then in verse 2 it says, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel. So that ruler in Israel will refer to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's when he'll come to rule. And it talks about him, says, whose going forth have been of old, from everlasting. So we know this is a prophecy of the birth of the Lord Jesus Christ in Bethlehem Ephratah. Remember, there were two Bethlehems. Bethlehem Ephratah was a Bethlehem that was in among the tribe of Judah, south of the Dead Sea area. And then there was also a Bethlehem in the north in the land of Zebulun. So the exact place, it was Bethlehem Ephratah, where Christ was to be born. Therefore, verse 3 says, will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth, then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. So I believe that's then again a prophecy concerning the second coming. Just a little note on chapter 5, the second paragraph there, the prophecy of the birthplace of Jesus given 700 years before the event. So 700 years before Christ was born, here's the prophecy. Many of it's a prophecy. It's never a prophecy if something's told about after it takes place. It's only a prophecy if it takes place, and it wouldn't really be considered a prophecy, a true prophecy, if it was given the day before it took place. This is 700 years before Christ was born. It was told he would be born in Bethlehem Ephratah. So 700 years before the event, and this was a prophecy that eventually led the wise men to Jesus. Remember when the wise men came looking for Christ? Where did they come? They came to Jerusalem because they felt the king would rule and reign in Jerusalem. But they came and they asked, where's he that's born king of the Jews? And Herod didn't know. And so he went to his wise men and they said, oh yeah, he's going to be born in Bethlehem Bethlehem, Ephratah. So that's the wise men then used that information to get there. Verse 5 also talks about the Assyrian, and this man shall be the peace when the Assyrian shall come into our land. So I believe this is another prophecy. Many use that as a prophecy that the Antichrist will be an Assyrian, and this is a prophecy of the Antichrist in the tribulation period. Chapter number 6. Let's look at chapter 6. Remember, this is a bird's eye view. We're flying high and flying fast. So, hear ye now what the Lord saith. Verse 1 of chapter 6. Arise, contend thou before the mountains. Let the hills hear thy voice. Hear ye, O mountains, the Lord's controversy, and ye strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. So here God calls the hills and the mountains to be his witness against Israel. I put a verse in there to compare, get an opportunity to go into Luke 19 and compare verses 28 through 40. One day even the rocks and the mountains and the trees will cry out glory to God. So that's seems like strange controversy when God's going to use the foundations of the earth to be a witness, but they will be. Okay, so Micah reminds, in this chapter, reminds the Jews that were in rebellion that the way to please God is not by a multitude of burnt offerings or of rivers of anointing oil or sacrificing their firstborn. Now, that was some of the practices that were taking place by the heathen. And so the heathen were offering their firstborn. They would take their firstborn child and sacrifice that firstborn child unto their God. And so the children of Israel, they got so taken up with religion and, how much these people must love their God because they're going to sacrifice their firstborn. Can you imagine how much they love their God? Now, see if we just use a carnal thinking, we can think, boy, that's real sacrifice. Man, this person's willing to give his firstborn son to show his love for his God. Well, that may be a religious way of worship, but that's not a spiritual or a godly way of worship. God's attitude toward the firstborn was not to sacrifice them, but to set them aside and to give them back openly to the Lord. And redeem them, not to. So, anyway, that's good verses there. Verses 6 through 8. He showed them how that's not the sacrifices that God is looking for. Verse 8 says, "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with my God." Now remember, this is in the Old Testament. This is not the way to be saved. This is a way that we can apply that to our life. This is how to live for the Lord. This is not how to get saved. Sometimes people want to take verses in the Old Testament, in the Sermon on the Mount, and figure, well, the way to be saved is just to do good. No. Remember, salvation is not by our righteousness. But that's a good verse on how to live. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. And so that's in chapter number 6. Chapter 7, let's just look at that for a moment. Chapter 7 says, Micah says, "This is woe unto me, for I am as when they have gathered the summer fruits, as grape gleanings of the vintage. There is no cluster to eat. My soul desireth the first ripe fruit. The good man is perished out of the earth. There is none aright among them. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net." So here Micah is discouraged because he seems to say, there's no good people left. I can't find an honest man. The people, if you read these verses, it would give you the description of the condition of the world at that time, in where Micah was prophesying. The people were given over to bribery. They were dishonest. Injustice was abounding. And so Micah concludes that he is to put his faith in the Lord and trust him to deal with Israel. And so that's where we are. When we look around and see a world condition, sometimes what are we going to do? We're just going to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not unto our own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. We can't do much sometimes about the way our nation's going. We can take a stand. We can make a vote. We can use our voice. We can stand up for righteousness. But in spite of that, sometimes it seems like we're still on a downward slope to rebellion. But we can still, that doesn't mean that we have to be on that slippery slope. We can still stand true for the Lord. So look what in verse 7, here's what Micah says. This is what he will do, and this is what we can do. He says, therefore, I will look unto the Lord. Look unto the Lord. Man, if there's a time when we need to look into the Lord, that's where our help is. The psalmist said, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from which cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord. So Micah said, therefore, because of the condition of the land, because of the wickedness of men, because of the Assyrians coming up upon Israel, and God was going to use the Assyrians as his instrument to bring judgment upon a rebellious people. He says, therefore, verse 7, I will look unto the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. So even though the world was in great turmoil, that doesn't mean that God had forsaken Micah. And there's always a remnant. And so let's make sure we're part of that remnant of believers, that God still look to the Lord and wait on the Lord, and the Lord will speak up for us. All right, so this, I believe, chapter 7 speaks much about the tribulation, and so we know that we're not going to go through the tribulation, but there will be a remnant of people who will survive the tribulation. There'll be souls saved in the tribulation. But remember, there will be much persecution during that tribulation period. I have a lot of folks that kind of approach me sometimes worrying about the mark of the beast and that type of thing. But remember, that mark of the beast is not something that we're going to have to fear, because that doesn't take place. The mark of the beast is not taking place until after we're taken on home. Amen? All right, so that's the book of Micah, and next week we'll do a bird's eye view of the book of Nahum, and there's only 3 chapters here, and it's really a prophecy concerning the city of Nineveh. So we'll look at that next week, and a few more chapters. We're marching toward the end, and soon we'll be finished with the Old Testament. Started who knows how long ago. I think I was still a kid when we started this, and but we'll have it. Okay, we're going to take an offering right now, very quickly. And so, if you have a prayer request, you write it down on the back of an offering envelope. Appreciate that. I'd like to say in our Sunday school class, very quickly, our Sunday school class, the Faith Promises that came, marked adult Bible class on the Faith Promise card. The faith promises from our class exceeded 200,000. 200, I think, and 6,000. I didn't think you guys had that kind of money, but I'm glad you do. And remember, it all belongs to the Lord, so we'll give it week by week. We'll give our part, and we'll make this